A big welcome back. My name's Steve and you're listening to the Go Footballing Podcast. This is the show that talks about grassroots football, whether you are a football coach, a player, parent or referee, or you've just got a love for the game. Sit tight, you are in the right place. So on the lineup today, we are looking at the transformation of the game and how we transition through there. We're also going to be looking at on the pitch. If you haven't listened to the show before, on the pitch, it's the little conversations that happen that you maybe can't hear from the sidelines, the things that the players are saying. As a referee, they're things that you can hear. Sometimes the coaches know about it too, but it's something that's on the pitch that's going under the radar. And just to fit in with the theme of the transitioning game, I've got some questions and answers regarding some of the smaller sided games and how we move through them. So that is the lineup today. Let's get into it. So as I did say, a big welcome back if you have listened to episode 1 and 2. If not, then you can always go back and listen to those. If you did listen to episode 2 and you've also emailed in, thank you very much for your comments. Some of the comments that came through though were actually looking at what some of the stats were from the smaller side of games. So last time we talked about the changes that are going to happen to the game for the 26 and 27 season. So just looking at some of the changes that they are looking at, in case you haven't listened, the FA are looking at bringing the size of the games down to 3v3 and 4v4. Now that's great, and we talked about some of the benefits, so do go back and listen to there, but here is a couple of statistics. Some of this research was done on a 4v4 v8v8 format, and they looked into a number of different aspects. So what did they get that was a benefit of doing those 4v4s, and what can we see as a benefit in the grassroots game? Well, there was 135% more passes made in a 4v4 game as opposed to an 8v8. There were 260% more scoring opportunities. Great, again. 500% more goals. Obviously, there's going to be more goals. There was 225% more 1v1s. And also, lastly, there was also 280% more dribbles in a game. All massive benefits to the game, all looking at technical aspects of developing players as they move through from the very youngest of age groups into that 11-a-side game that we all like to see. So that brings us nicely in today then about what we're going to talk about, which is transitioning and the difficulties that maybe coaches get and also players find from moving through from the very smaller of games that we have at the moment, 5v5, right the way up to 11v11 and some of the challenges. So Palos, let's start this one off then for you guys back who are listening. Where did you find the biggest transition and where did you find the biggest challenges going through? Did you find it from 5v5 or 7 to 7v7, or did you find that was an easy transition? What about the 7v7 into 9v9? What were the challenges that you found with players there, and what challenges did you find as maybe as a coach, or if you're watching as a parent, what was the biggest changes that you noticed? And then just moving on to that 11v11 game as well. What was the biggest transition in football? Is it 9v9 into 11v11? And if it is the biggest change, what are the things that make it the hardest transition for either a player or alternatively for a coach and as a parent watching maybe? I mean, the system is kind of set up so that we go from 5v5 and we increase numbers slowly, probably for a number of different reasons. Looking at those smaller games and what we're really trying to get out of them, what are we trying to get? Well, we're trying to develop players so that we can get to that 11v11. You know, if we had a group of, let's say we had and I'm sure many coaches will have this and many parents will have seen it, groups of 8-year-olds trying to play 11-a-side football as well. It turns into a little bit of cattle herding sometimes as well, where they're all running after the ball. So it's really good that we have smaller pitches that are more suited to those players, and we can develop skills all the way through. Now that does have challenges with it. It has challenges of how do we transition and change the rules slightly to make it more and more game realistic to the full-size 11-a-side game that we're looking for, and what skills can we take through them. Now just in my experience, I actually found that the 7v7 into 9v9 was the biggest transition. Now I probably found that for a few different reasons. One is the pitch is instantly bigger, and it's much bigger. You know, the 7-a-side pitches, you know, if you've got some fit footballers, you've got boys and girls that can run from box to box and be box to box midfielders and defenders. Everyone's able to defend. It's a very, very different game there's also alternative rules in there. We then have the retreat rule in there, for example. There's also no offside in 7v7. And the younger age groups, especially this year, also they've had no headers and no kick-ins. But I think that the biggest transition really for me was going from teams of looking after 7v7s into 9v9s and getting players to transition correctly into those. Another thing that also I find with that transition is that for some of the players, those goals all of a sudden become huge. And I know that they do with the 11-a-side game too. But I do find that the jump from 7v7 to 9v9, I think that's the biggest one. Before we go any further though, I do want to say a big thanks to the coaches on a lot of the groups that I messaged out to and reached out to get their points of view on the biggest transitions and how they found some of the transitions going through the games and what they found was the most challenging too. I got a real mixed bag that came back, which is pretty much what I was looking for really. Although I found that the biggest transition was 9v9, there was obviously some other coaches that were finding some other big jumps too. On some of the groups, I got messaged in from Matt as well. So thanks to Matt, who came in and said that the biggest jump for him was 9v9 to 11v11. Said for him though, it was still good. It kind of mirrors directly what they see on TV and when they're watching the actual game, or even when they're, especially with a lot of the younger players, if they were playing FIFA and played games like that, then also mirrors what they've got there. But in terms of change, pitch sizes effectively double, which is what one of the challenges, and then depending on the goal sizes as well, depending on what venue they're at, the goal sizes can jump significantly, which is horrible for goalkeepers, and more significantly, the changing of surfaces as well. I think with a lot of 7v7, 9v9 pitches, a lot of clubs are able to get onto 3G, 4G pitches, whereas as soon as you turn into 11-a-side, it's much more, it's almost all games are pretty much played on grass because you can only get one game on them, whereas on the 7v7 and the 5v5, you get multiple games at the same time. That also has some other challenges because the ball doesn't roll perfectly on grass every time. There's always lumps and bumps. I mean, if you'd have seen the pitch that I refereed on Sunday, honestly, I couldn't see some bits. It was like looking over the horizon at some times. I think with that big jump in the pitch too, especially for some players, is that you also find that fitness is a big issue from moving through these stages of football. And I think that you probably are right there, Matt, as well. There's a massive change from 9v9 to 11v11, especially on the fitness side. I think some of the other challenges that maybe players do find as they move through these stages is that they are getting less ball time. If we're going from 5v5, they'll probably kick the ball a lot of times. And the stats that I mentioned earlier on, there's a lot of stats there that are proving that the smaller games, 500% more goals, for example, is great. And that's only against an 8v8 format, in the comparison for the percentages. So obviously it's going to be a lot lower on the 11v11 game, but things like more dribbles, more passes, all those things are all going to be less in the bigger games. And sometimes that is a struggle for some players. But also got some message from Adam too, who mentioned that the second season for their team as a 9v9, total waste of time, and they outgrew the pitches very, very quickly. And halfway through the second season of 9v9, they were already prepping for 11-a-side and getting as many 11-a-side games in as what they could do. I think where I hear that more is I hear that more not with the 9v9 into 11v11 of prepping too soon. I do find that a lot of the 7v7s try to go to 9v9 very quickly and start setting those seeds in of offside and how to play offside, and because that's a completely different tactic to what we were playing as a 7v7. I think a lot of it also does depend on coaches and what their approach is really, of are they going to start a plan and prep, and if they do, are they making the transition from a 7-a-side or a 5v5 to 7v7? Are they trying to make that easy? Had a different Matt, so big thanks. It seems like all the Matts are emailing in and messaging in as well. So big thanks to Matt for sending this one in. They've just gone up to 7v7 and they thought the transition from 5v5 to 7v7 was actually easy. And he actually gave us a bit of context as to that as well. So some of the context for that was that they were playing a 1-2-1 last season as 5v5. So they transitioned into 7-a-side as a 1-1-4-1, okay, which is great because what they've basically done is added two wingers to it, added two players in the same place, defenders still doing the same task, strikers still doing the same task. Remember, these are kids, they know what they've got to do on the pitch. If they've had a couple of years of of learning those things, I think that's made his transition really easy. So thanks, Matt. A really, really good point for that one. Another reason why I also think that the 7v7 to 9v9 and then also onwards to 11v11 sometimes becomes harder for players, and where they may struggle as well, is sometimes they have some extra expectations. Maybe that's from parents and spectators. Maybe they've got that in themselves as well, seeing how competitive some players are that we see around the world in the professional game. And seeing how competitive they are, and maybe pushing themselves to try and be like that, especially as they are developing and growing, and in the grassroots game as well. No one's ever going to be the perfect player. So I think that the pressure that they put on themselves is probably a little bit unnecessary, but that can be, exaggerated slightly by, especially if parents and also on-watchers have different expectations for players that are on the pitch, and different expectations for what the game is. And I think that sometimes they can also be slightly confused of the mixed messages from parents and also coaches. Hearing something from one side of the pitch, maybe they've been asked to go and play as a holding player in one of the games, and that's a brand new role for us that maybe parents haven't seen their players play that, or their team play that one, and the coach has given some examples, and all of a sudden we've got a parent telling them to get up the pitch, and they're supposed to be a holding player. And sometimes that can be a really, really challenging time for a player transitioning through the game. But some other examples of where players can really struggle or find challenges within the game and of going through these is, it's a couple of messages that actually came in as well. So big thanks to Johnny for sending this one in too, is that players can dominate on small pitches and a shadow of themselves in big pitches. And I think that's completely correct. Sometimes you will see some players that are very, very dominant in those smaller games. And a couple of the reasons are they are probably one of the bigger players. Maybe they're one of the older age groups in one of those games. It's a smaller pitch, so they can be everywhere and really, really dominate. And on a larger pitch, if the ball is played around them and they don't get near it, or there's a different style of play, it's completely different for them. And sometimes they can find that a bit of a struggle because, I'm sure that a lot of coaches and a lot of parents will have seen this, and they'll have seen a couple of players in their team that were, they were brilliant last season and the season before, not doing too much this season. What we have to remember is, one is that they're children, so let's just talk to them like they are children and treat them like that. But on the other side of that, yeah, they probably were, because they were probably bigger in a small pitch, and the ball went through them every time, and maybe they were able to dribble from box to box on a 5v5, before the other players started developing. Maybe they were the biggest and strongest at one point, so they had a bit of an advantage over other players. But it can still be a challenge for some players, just to realise that the game is different to the one that they were playing and being able to dominate in first. And that same message also came through from Arthur as well. So again, thanks for coming in with that. Yeah, about the dominant players. I suppose that also just adds to the challenges of a coach as well, as how do we manage a player that maybe was really dominant, scoring goals a lot, winning the ball a lot, and then all of a sudden feel like they're maybe out of the game a little bit because there's more players on the pitch. The pitch is bigger, they can't be everywhere all at once. So that's also maybe a challenge that we've got as coaches and also as parents, really. If you've got the players that are coming home and, you're talking in the car home, or you're talking, before training sessions, and it's a case of, I'm not enjoying it as much, I'm not scoring as many goals or anything like that. Just reassure them the pitches are bigger, everything's different, it's a different game, really good at that. We maybe need to change how you play now. Let's talk to the coach, let's find out all these things. Let's look at the game, how it develops, how it changes, where we're going to be. They're all things that parents can also think of too. I think one thing that is clear though as well is going to that 11v11 jump as well. And this was just a comment from Luke that had messaged in to just say that with the goal sizes, a goalkeeper just cannot cover the space and encourages the opposition to start shooting more. So, absolutely. It's a big transition that we have to make for goalkeepers, knowing that we're probably going to let more goals in because the goals are huge compared to what they're used to. And I've seen goalkeepers in teams that I've managed before where they've moved up to the full-size goals as 13-year-olds, and they've been 5'2", 5'3", and bear in mind these goals are 8 foot high. If the ball goes and it's going to hit the top just underneath the crossbar, there's literally nothing the keeper can do because they can't jump, even with their arm at full stretched, to actually stop the ball from going in. And I've seen loads of goals go in that position. Maybe not because they were pin perfect shots, but the more shots that are taken in that exact example there, the more shots are taken because the goals are bigger, You know, it's going to be something that's going to be a real challenge for goalkeepers. And yeah, that's a massive transition period through the game. This one's just in from a coach as well. So Daniel as well, thanks for messaging in. He thinks that the biggest change is also from 11v11. He actually is coaching under 16s and went and had them right away from under 8s. So, you know, jumping right the way up there, thinks that the playing time, he said that he also used to have a player that was able in, even in 9v9, that was able to go box to box and just a box to box midfielder and could cover all of that ground, fitness wise, size wise to the pitch. And that's great that you've got that, but the biggest transition that he had, for, especially for that player of the example that he used, is that the player was no longer able to do that at 11v11. In fact, they thought that they could do that, and they were absolutely tired from doing that and just trying to run the length of the pitch and playing the game that they were playing, you know, in the previous season into that season. So he had to make some adjustments for that player, and kind of moulded that player into a holding midfield player. So just a quick little breakdown then. I think that for players, you know, fitness, bigger pitches, less touches on the ball, a lot more running, more discipline of positions, you know, I think that they are all key factors that are real struggles for players, and that's, as they transition through the game, they're really things that we need to think of as coaches and as parents, how we can support players through that. Just before we do go on to our next section as well, big thanks to everyone who either messaged in, contacted us via Facebook, or just emailed into us, or interacted through some other social platforms. A massive thank you for all your feedback for this week's show. If you do want any information about where you can see where we're looking for that, or you want to comment in to the show and just put your points forward on any part of grassroots football, really, you know, we're going to cover a lot of topics in this series. So, you know, do feel free to email in at any time, and you can do that at gofootballpod@gmail.com. So just email straight in, let's interact, let me find out what it is that you guys are thinking, that are listening, and where we can take some of the shows for some of the points that you've got in grassroots football that are important to you. So next, it's the next section then as well. So this is one of the ones that I do like. So with this section, it's on the pitch. So what happened on the pitch for me this week? Well, you know, we're back to game time as well. Weather was good, finally. Finally got a big, nice weather. That's all happy. And obviously the players are happy as well. They're all coming in. And one of the teams that I coach, we travel all across the Midlands as well. So, you know, this weekend for a 50-minute game of football, I've got a 2-hour drive there, 2-hour drive back. It's quite far. So you're always hoping that some of these games that we've got, they're always going to be good games. But this was the first one back that the boys had not played for a long time. We had a team that were travelling about an hour to get to us as well. So a fair distance, especially for a 50-minute game. But this time, a couple of our players had actually been invited to a Cat 1 Academy, which is great that they did that, but it did leave me short, and it did actually leave me without a goalkeeper this week. So, you know, we're playing against a good team. They're good at shooting. We knew they were going to score as well. Didn't score as many as what we thought. However, we had 2 outfield players that had to take it in turns playing in goal. We're just having the one goalkeeper. Fine, he's back this week as well. Enjoyed his session, and to be honest, I'm happy that he went and played with a Cat 1 Academy and was able to go and enjoy that and experience that. Because as coaches, we always want our players to be able to progress and see that progression. So, you know, more than happy with it. However, it did mean that some goals went in, and for some reason, I'm not quite sure why, we ended up giving a penalty away. In fact, I know the reason why we gave it away. It was a massive shove, 2 hands in the back. Tell the lad off, don't do that. That's not how we play football. That's not our standards. But anyway, gave a penalty away. Lad goes up to take the penalty. I think they were 3-1 up at the time as well. So we're losing 3-1. This is to make it 4-1. We've got our smallest defender that we've got in goal. Puts his hands up. Referee blows his whistle, runs up, kicks it. Our goalkeeper saves it. Now that's brilliant as well. And to be fair to our outfield players, they made some amazing saves for outfield players that don't play in goal and playing with a bib on. And you know, one of those things, coaches, you know that if you turn up and someone's in goal with a bib on, you know that they aren't a goalkeeper and that they're an outfield player that's just playing in goal for that game. So what happens? They get peppered with shots. And that's what happened, but they made some amazing saves. So massive well done to the 2 players that did that. However, we come in at full time and I'm saying to the lads, look, I think that we could have played better. I think we could have done this better. I don't think we moved the ball in these areas. I think our decision making could have maybe been better. They're all things that we can work on, and we're going to work on all of these things on Monday. But I always ask the players, rate how you think you did in the game. So I get a bit of an aspect, get a bit of feedback really on how they've played or how they think they've played and what I think they've played like. And then I say, don't forget to share that with your parents in the car and see what they think. It's just something that I do. Normally get really good results as well. And one of the lads just said, we should have had the first goalkeeper should have played in goal for the whole amount. Well, the second half was the one that had the penalty. And as soon as that one lad said that, they all just turned round and just went, he saved a penalty. I think that deserved a bit of a round of applause for him as well. But also, that was what happened this week as well. So yeah, not having players on the pitch, but then also having players saying, not, even when you're saving a penalty as a goalkeeper, I think that's sometimes one of the hardest positions to play, goalkeeper. So yeah, massive well done. That is on the pitch. So before we wrap this show up, I just want to do just a couple of questions as well. Just a little bit of trivia about how the game transitions and some of the different formats as well. So quick one. Let's have a quick look at this. So in the 5v5, what size football is typically played with under 7s and under 8s? I'm sure you're all going to know this. If you've got children that are playing that one, you'll know they're playing with size 3 balls. So on the 7v7 game, so what age do we transition from a 5v5 to 7v7? I know that some counters are going to be slightly different as well, but under 9s is generally when that transition happens. Transitioning then, so let's have a look at the 9v9 game. So what is the standard size of the goal in 9v9? I think these are huge, even for me as well, but they are 7 by 16 foot. That's massive. Especially as that they actually transition to 9v9 at under 12s. So, looking at under 12s, looking at 11-year-olds on those kind of pitches and those kind of goal sizes as well. Huge! And lastly, let's go for the 11v11 game as well. So what is the typical size or full-size pitch of an 11v11 football? That is 100 by 64 yards. So that is it for this week on the Go Footballing podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please do email in and just get in contact with us. That is gofootballpod@gmail.com. Probably see us on all the other socials too, whether that is also on Spotify or on YouTube. Should also be able to find us on, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. We're on all of them. But again, big thank you to everyone that did message in, anyone that may left comments for this show. And I will see you again next week.